Hello and welcome back to the Courtroom Advocate channel. My name is Miriam Washira. Today I'm going to tell you a story of a brief that was given to support persons living with disabilities, specifically girls who are being abused in a certain school. So this is one of those very, I would say, life-changing cases also. Those cases you're given and you're thinking, how am I supposed to do this, or what is supposed to happen? But also a case that made me read a lot and go looking for information in new ways. And actually it helped me actually get into one of the trainings by a big organization on how to handle cases that involved people living with disability. So this was one of those cases. Actually, at this time of my career, I was a juvenile defender. I was doing mostly defense, but we were called by a certain school that has deals with children living with disability, and they said they needed help. They needed somebody who could support them because they had two girls in their school who had been abused, but they were having a hard time trying to follow this matter in court, so they needed legal support for this. So I jumped into this matter, and where I found it, actually it had stagnated, somehow almost actually being thrown out, and the magistrate who was handling it then had actually indicated he did not think that this matter can proceed. He thinks it's not possible, and it's because these particular children had developmental challenges. Their communication was quite low, and generally they had developmental challenges, and they could not communicate properly. So the courts and the prosecutor actually had already agreed that this is a matter that they did not think it could go on. So luckily, when I came in and I started following the matter was transferred to a different magistrate, and this particular magistrate was very upbeat and said, yes, we can actually do this matter can be heard. And because I liked how she reasoned, she asked, these children do communicate, then how come we think that they cannot communicate in court? And that attitude only actually really brought the matter alive and helped everyone to have back the motivation to follow up and just to protect these children. So we ended up in court, and when the matter was called, one of the things we did as a pre-trial is we had somebody who understood the language they spoke, but it was a bit of hard language to understand, so their parents, their caregivers, and actually their teachers understood them. So one of the things that the court allowed was an intermediary to testify on their behalf. So more like an interpreter, but not necessarily, but not really an interpreter, more of an intermediary who testified on behalf of these children, because they understood them, they understood what they were saying, they understood what had happened. So they came in and testified as an intermediary. This was very important because the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that everyone has a right to an effective remedy by a competent national tribunal for acts that violate their fundamental rights. So the fact that the previous court felt that they could not help was actually going against the rights of these children, because they deserved justice at that moment, because somebody had abused them, and they had actually abused them sexually. So it was so important that the court was very accommodative. When you look at the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability, Article 13 talks about the right to access justice. So the court, the state, is being called upon in these in such cases to make sure that there is enough accommodation, that people living with disability are able to access justice. So there are different barriers. For instance, legal barriers. For instance, our Evidence Act does not provide for such persons and how they should their evidence should be brought into court. Talking about intermediaries and other accommodations. Different ways of communicating. how evidence is brought into court. If such a person is not able to produce evidence, how is it to be produced, and so on. So we are looking at changing the legal framework to accommodate everyone, so that everyone can access justice. There are those attitudinal barriers, like the first court that was handling the matter. It had already declared, no, this is a matter that should not proceed. Just that, having that attitude that people living with disabilities are not able to express themselves, or it's okay. And the attitude can be all the way around, even by caregivers. There are caregivers who realize that the people living with disability who they're taking care of are being abused, but there's that attitude of it's okay, or let it pass, or it's too much to follow up, or it happens all over, so let it just pass. So that barrier actually becomes a barrier for people living with disability to access justice. So we need to change the attitude and agree that everybody is equal before the law, whether you live with a disability, whatever your status, we are all equal before the law. And so we should be able to access our courts and get justice like anyone else does. The other one is information and communication barriers. Also the fact that most of the people living with disability are not educated about their rights. They do not know when they are being abused or not being abused. So if you're a parent of a child living with disability, how have you empowered them so that they know when they're being abused? When should they actually go about looking for their rights? So there needs to be a lot of awareness and legal empowerment of people living with disability, so that they are able to access their rights at any given time. Teach your child or even that young adult you're looking for, even the adult who is living with disability, about any abuse or anything and how to report it. Help them communicate as much as possible and give them the information that they need so that they can protect themselves. The other one I've seen is physical barrier. For instance, in this case, one of the girls had issues, mobility issues also. So even accessing the court sometimes will be such a challenge. So it's the way we build our facilities that is quite also insensitive, that we do not consider people living with disability and how they will access different kinds of services. So for this accommodation, the court has to move to where the person is or to where they can access. So let's not say they could not come into court, so this matter cannot be heard, or this matter is adjourned. The frequent adjournment for such matter is usually because they did not come to court, but we did not ask ourselves why they did not come to court, or even how can we help them access court. So even as we go about our development, and if you as a citizen, when there are new developments, if you have a say in them, ask, are there accommodations for anybody with any kind of disability? Is it accessible to everyone in the society? So we need to look out for each other. The other one is economical barriers. So this is barriers brought about because, as it is, the general public, even for the general public to afford a lawyer in Kenya is still out of reach for most people. But for people living with disability, it is actually worse because they have to take care of these extra needs that they have, and they might not afford a lawyer. Their caregivers have so much in their hands. Maybe you have one child who is living with disability, but you also have other children, and the question is, should I leave my work to go follow up on this one? So because of those economical factors, most disabled people living with disability are not able to access services, or even legal services especially, and they're not able, even for instance, even just transport. How will they get to court? It requires something extra. They might require a private means because maybe the public means are not accessible. So for this case, what I learned is how as a system, as a people, if we are sensitive and we are accommodative, everybody can access justice. The magistrate in this matter actually was very accommodative, and she set time aside, because one of the things is that also this matter took very long because of the many intricacies in it. When there's an intermediary. You know, the court want to ask, why did you decide that's what she said? You know, how what connection. So this is one matter that took very long, but also the magistrate was very patient, never pushed. You know, we went with our timing. So it was one of those where the magistrate made all the difference actually. And you know, when the magistrate has a proper attitude, also the prosecutor has no you know, has no leeway, but they just have to follow up. And so this, in this case, actually at the end, the perpetrator, because it was one perpetrator who was abusing both of these girls, was actually convicted, which was such a success in this case, because it was a person who was had a lot of access to disabled children, and you know, it meant that if this was let go, they could have gotten back to their job and maybe even continued abusing other children. So in this matter, that patience, that knowledge, that women living with disability need to be protected, came in, you know, played a big role. Statistics has shown that actually half of women living with disability have experienced some kind of violence, and especially sexual violence in their lifetime. This is quite a staggering figure, or a figure that is shocking. So we are saying that for our children, and especially girls and even boys who are living with disability, we need to take care of them more. We need to watch out for them more. We need to give them accommodation so that we protect them, and they also access all the services like any other citizen. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think on this matter.